Welcome back to CannaWeek, brought to you by New Frontier Data, where we deliver the week's top headlines in cannabis and hear experts weigh in on the impact these stories are having on the industry. I'm your host, Heather Wickline. Our first guest began his career as a civil rights attorney and has worked on a range of policy issues over the last 30 years. He currently serves as executive director for the Marijuana Policy Project, which is the leading U.S. organization advancing legalization of cannabis for adult use and medical treatment. Please welcome Stephen Hawkins. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you, Heather.
Thank you. And today, joining us as our in-house expert, she serves as Director of Industry Analytics at New Frontier Data. Please welcome back Dr. Molly McCann.
Hi, Heather. Good to be back.
Always. Well, today we have a great show. We are continuing our coverage of the 2020 election. And today we're going to dig into some post-election insights as we had some great news come across for the industry and as a whole. So let's just dive right in. Yahoo Finance reported 2020 elections, 5 states passed legal marijuana measures, potentially growing industry by $9 billion. So given the passage of these ballot initiatives, more Americans will now live in states that than a legal market than not. And likewise, a majority of Congress now represents states with some form of legal cannabis. Stephen, I'd like to start with you. Do you anticipate a change in the national conversation concerning cannabis now?
I do, Heather. I think that, you know, the sheer numbers of constituents will have more of a bearing on how our politicians act, right? Both at the state and the federal level. So for example, you know, John Thune woke up the day after election and realized that the electorate in his state had adopted cannabis, not only for medical use, but for adult use as well. So the future, I think, we will see more politicians in states that have legalized. Ultimately, we will see more sort of Terry Gardners emerge on the Republican side, and of course more champions on the Democratic side as well.
Molly, I know you've been watching this closely. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that, you know, I focus mostly on the consumer side of things, looking at consumer behavior and attitudes. And, you know, we've known for a long time that cannabis consumers are extremely diverse. You know, we're really starting to see now that it's not only in Democratic states, but it's in both red and blue states that reform is coming. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to see accelerate, which has already been happening, is the acceleration of the social stigma going away. You know, people have consumed at you know, decent rates all over the country for a while. You know, we do sometimes have some challenges in seeing who is consuming in terms of being open about that and telling us the details and telling us, you know, being able to predict in those more conservative states how the exact rates of consumption. But as more and more of the country in all different parts of the country begin to legalize this use, the stigma is going to go away, and we're going to be able to see more accurate insights from our surveys and polling, which is great. And also, yeah, the reform is just going to continue to speed up.
Yeah. Stephen, what do you think as far as which ballot initiative do you think is going to have the biggest regional impact?
I think New Jersey will. I think that New Jersey now will be not only a large market within the state, but we're going to see a pull from, you know, residents in Pennsylvania and New York and even Connecticut coming into New Jersey probably by the fall. So hopefully that means that New York, which has been considering cannabis legalization now for a couple of sessions, the same with Connecticut, that we'll see movement in those states. So hopefully New Jersey means a domino effect for the Northeast, and also perhaps for the Mid-Atlantic as well, Pennsylvania and Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, it already is such a great tourist destination for all their beaches and stuff for people going there. So hopefully this will be a big bump. Do you think the legalization in Mississippi will create a similar domino effect in the South?
You know, I've been thinking similarly. I hope that we will see from Mississippi's passage more concerted effort in Alabama, in South Carolina, where MPP has been working at least the last couple of years to try to get legislation passed. I think that, as individuals get medical cards from other states, perhaps we'll see some inflow in from Louisiana, for example, which has a tighter market. So that Southeast has been one of the last sort of difficult spots in the country. So Mississippi passing not only a medical ballot initiative, but the breadth of it will allow for a lot of different businesses across the state. So hopefully that will put pressure on some of the other holdouts in the South.
Molly, what do you think as far as what you've been seeing?
I mean, I completely agree. New Jersey is the biggest state here that we should be talking about, both for just the number of people who live there that are now going to have access, for the relatively low tax rate in New Jersey is going to do a lot to fight back against the illicit market, which, I live in California, and we know the illicit market is a big challenge here. And the government, the high tax rates are not helping in terms of, drawing people to the legal market from the illicit market. I also think that Mississippi it's a really big deal, being the first southern state to start, that is the first domino, as you were saying. I had a question for Stephen, actually. Now that we've seen Mississippi, what would your guess be about where next in the South we're going to see some reform?
Wow, Molly. Yeah, my bias is I think on South Carolina. We have excellent sponsors of the medical bill there. I think we will see a floor vote on the House in this session. We just need to get a fair shake in the Senate. So if South Carolina comes online, then it puts more pressure on Alabama. So my bet is on South Carolina, since we've been there for the last couple of years and have built some good relationships.
It's exciting.
It is. Well, moving on to the New Jersey market that we've all been talking about, realmoney.com reported cannabis providers ready to go as New Jersey okays recreational marijuana use. So as we were talking about this possibly having the biggest impacts, what can we expect from neighboring states like Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York? How fast do you anticipate them coming online?
I would hope, Heather, that we will see New York move quickly, quickly in terms of New York standards. But look, this is the third time the governor has said, we're going to pass cannabis legalization. I think that the pressure's on, right? And so hopefully we will get good news out of Albany as we enter into the spring of 21. Pennsylvania's interesting. I mean, there you have a governor who has tweeted his support and is quite vocal about wanting to see legalization. But we also have some, Republican leadership in the state that is adamantly opposed. Now, how much their views might shift as we get more conservative voices talking about the changes taking place in South Dakota and Mississippi, we will see. But I am cautiously optimistic that we'll start to see, and perhaps from a fiscal perspective, change in Pennsylvania. I mean, the state budgets are decimated right now. Cannabis is an excellent opportunity to bring some needed resources into the states.
Yeah, between tax and jobs alone, I mean, what they could do for a state is incredible. Molly, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the last couple of times I think I was on the podcast, Heather, we were talking about coronavirus and the economic uncertainty that was causing. Well, and it seems like it's happening again. I think this winter may be tough. And we still, we're still in a place where it's not clear, we're not out of the woods in terms of the economy. And I think that all of these states, certainly around New Jersey, now that they have New Jersey to compete with, they've said to different degrees that they're excited about moving forward with their own adult use programs. And I think those states, in addition to some other states around the country, if the economic situation really begins to worsen, I think that this is another, this is another possible way out of that. And all of these, the voter support behind all these initiatives really just makes that a more popular possible option for politicians, right? They know that it could be good for raising tax revenue, and they know that people support it.
Yeah, maybe if they see someone close by, like New Jersey doing it, they'll kick in their, I don't know, FOMO or something, that they should be doing this.
Yeah, fear of missing out on that revenue for sure.
Exactly. It's fear of missing out on jobs and job creation. So yeah. Stephen, we've seen, growing pains in new markets as they come online. Are there similar concerns from New Jersey's adult use market? I would assume that meeting the demand is going to be very difficult at first as they get up and running.
That is a big concern in New Jersey. As far as I know, Curaleaf is the only company there that's at least building or expanding upon an existing grow facility. No doubt that if New Jersey opened its doors tomorrow, supply would vastly outstrip demand. So that's why the thinking is really that, hopefully by the fall, maybe even the fourth quarter, we can see some reasonable activity out of New Jersey. But again, that's because of all of that demand from neighboring states. So the real challenge now is it's the kind of challenge that we want, Heather, right? Which is, how to build and get up to scale in New Jersey over this next year.
Yeah. Molly, what are your thoughts on that?
The consumers are there. I think that we've seen in these Western states that consumers the market is really maturing in terms of what product forms are available. The tastes are becoming more refined, and it's what's happened over the course of many years here in California and on the West Coast is going to happen a lot more quickly on the East Coast, especially since, because of the illicit market, a lot of the products that are here on the West Coast are making their way to the East Coast anyway. So I think that the consumers in the East Coast, there'll need to be some consumer education, certainly around certain kinds of product forms and maybe strains to a lesser extent. But the consumers they know what's available and they know what they like, even if they don't necessarily have the full legal access to those things that they prefer yet.
Right. Well, Stephen, Molly's been talking a lot just about how cannabis in itself has become a lot less taboo and there's a lot more support. Just in your recent experience, who would you say is the most surprising or influential person or new advocates for cannabis?
Wow. I wish I could name 3 or 4 people off the top of my head. And that's really our challenge, Heather. There's celebrities in the space. I'd love to see someone like Jordan Peele be more of a champion, but he talks about how he wrote Get Out while under the influence, and it won him an Academy Award. So there's something to be said about that. But look, we know, and Molly's point was excellent, that there are people of every walk of life who are cannabis consumers. Our biggest challenge, I think, is, and this is a challenge I see for grassroots organizing, but how do we remove this stigma that's out there? I think it is lifting, but we will need to get more individuals who, whether they're Wall Street bankers, doctors, lawyers, to speak out and show the changing face. I see this as the year, hopefully, that we go from being a punchline on, a Fox News segment to serious discussion. So that's the work ahead of us.
Yeah, on our last podcast, we talked about how there's definitely been a lot of celebrity endorsements coming through, but on top of that, in addition of celebrities actually investing and getting involved in these brands and really, not necessarily just doing an endorsement or being an influencer, but really getting involved, which has been amazing. Molly, anybody that comes to mind for you, of anybody that are like new advocates popping up on the horizon?
No, nothing particularly surprising. I just I enjoy, like you're talking about, who are the new celebrities that are coming out with product lines, and then from my perspective, studying the consumer, trying to understand what slice of the consumer market are each of these celebrities trying to go for, right? Because Martha Stewart hasn't gone into the full THC product lines yet, but I would not be surprised if she does in the near future. And, the Martha Stewart consumer is very different from, who's going to buy. I guess Jay-Z's product line is actually going for a pretty wide swath of consumers, but there's a lot of, that's a sign of how mature this market is being able to really slice the consumers by not only their demographics, but their lifestyle, and understanding that through, this identifying with a favorite celebrity. It's a really smart way to do it, especially when there's so many challenges to advertising, right? That you can't advertise in the way that you otherwise would be able to. So building this affinity with a celebrity is a really great way to do it. And I would absolutely buy a Jordan Peele strain of whatever he wants to sell. I think he captures that, creative, artistic, young, brilliant person really well. And that's another, there's a lot of cannabis consumers that fit that spend quite a bit of money on the product. So that would be a very smart niche to go after.
Yeah, we had Canopy Growth on recently, and they were talking about Martha Stewart's CBD line, but then they also have Snoop's like THC line, and I was like, I don't know, those guys are friends. Maybe we will see something.
Yep.
Stephen, actually, when you say big law firms and stuff, we actually just did a webinar recently with Denton's, and they have a huge cannabis practice now, and they're one of the largest law firms in the world. So I think those kind of big players coming into the space is going to make a huge difference.
I agree. I just it's always interesting that you have your own temperature checks. So I had my annual physical the other day, and my doctor was like, "Hey, didn't a bunch of states just pass? That's really interesting." So.
I know. I feel like my own father, who is the most straight-laced person, he had a embroidered belt that had marijuana leaves on it, and I was like, wow, how risque of you, Dad. Well, we're almost out of time, so I want to Stephen, any final thoughts for our audience before we say goodbye? Anything that you're working on at the Marijuana Policy Project they should know about?
Oh wow, we'll certainly be active in Connecticut and Maryland, which I think has a great chance of seeing passage this year, which would really open up things in the Mid-Atlantic. And then I fully expect that we'll see efforts next year in New York and New Mexico. So lots to build on from this year, Heather. We
got to keep that momentum going.
Absolutely.
Molly, anything for our listeners?
I just, it's good at this time, I think, to step back and really appreciate how far cannabis has come in the last 25 years since California first legalized medical in 1996. This now, for the first time, we have more Americans living, and we talked about this before, more Americans living in fully adult use states than in completely illicit states. So we have 34% of Americans living where now cannabis, recreational cannabis use is legal, compared to 29% in illicit states. And it's happened relatively quickly. the popular opinion on cannabis has changed dramatically in that time. And to the extent that we're even seeing like what happened in Oregon this week with decriminalizing small amounts of all drugs. And I think that cannabis is a big part of the reason that people are thinking differently about criminal justice as it relates to drug policy. And cannabis has really changed American culture in a significant way in the last 25 years. And I just think it's a pretty remarkable thing to reflect on.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. Well, thank you both for taking the time and joining me today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us at CannaWeek. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. And to keep up to date on all our election coverage and see all the new updates and projections, visit newfrontierdata.com/2020. I'm your host, Heather Wickline, and I will see you next time.